What is Orichalcum? We've been investigating the stranger substances that the people of Tamriel create weapons and armor from, materials like ice and glass. Well, today we are investigating another material, a grey-green metal called Orichalcum. The Orcimer, or pariah folk in the Elven tongue, the people more commonly known as orcs, are renowned for their use of this material in the creation of their famously superior armor and weapons. But what is the deal with this metal? I've never heard of it outside of the Elder Scrolls universe before, unlike earthly materials like iron, gold, or silver. Even malachite, the main substance used in the creation of glass armor, is from the real world, and of course ice is found on Earth, although lacking the magical fortitude of Skyrim. So what is Orichalcum? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet, and today we are investigating the mysterious metal known as Orichalcum. Now, you may be surprised to know, as I was, that this metal actually has its origins in our own real world. I had always assumed Orichalcum was just an orcish metal. Orcish, Auric, Orichalcum, Orichalcum, you can sort of see how one would think that they are naturally connected. Well, upon researching further, I discovered that Orichalcum is actually the name of a lost and somewhat mythological metal. The very first mentioning of the stuff in our own real world's history is in the 7th century BC, in a Homeric hymn dedicated to the god Aphrodite. But it was Plato, the Athenian philosopher, that would excite historians about the mysterious lost metal. In the Critias, one of Plato's later dialogues, he mentions Orichalcum being used by the people of Atlantis, which is likely not a real place, but when talking about a temple to Poseidon on Atlantis, he said, "In the center of the temple stood a pillar of Orichalcum, on which the laws of Poseidon and records of the first sun princes of Poseidon were inscribed." In the millennia since Plato's writings of Atlantis and mentions of Orichalcum, historians have provided many different theories as to what Orichalcum actually is. A gold-copper alloy, copper-tin alloy, copper-zinc brass, no one knows for sure. It simply remains a metal or metal alloy that has been lost to time. So the coolest part of all of this is how the myths and legends surrounding the metal Orichalcum in our real world actually connects to the mythos of the Elder Scrolls. Orichalcum is not a material that is exclusive to the land of Tamriel. It is commonly associated with the orcs, but there is another culture from another land that has a close connection with the metal. Yakuta, the dry continent far to the west. You would probably be aware that the Red Guards of Hammerfell are descendants of the original Yakutans who fled their homeland, but why did they flee? Well, there were some huge wars and conflicts tearing the place apart, but ultimately some kind of either natural disaster or magical destruction occurred and caused the continent to sink into the depths of the ocean. Upon the continent of Yakuta, prior to its destruction, was an enormous tower constructed from Orichalcum, and it was known as the Orichalc Tower, built by the now extinct left-handed elves of the land. These left-handed elves, also known as the Sinistral Elves, prior to their extinction were fighting against the Yakutans constantly, and it was said that the Yakutan god, Diagna, the Orichalc god of the Sideways Blade and avatar of Hunding, brought Orichalc weapons to the Yakutan people, which was critical in their victory over the elves. In the Elder Scrolls Online, you can even find an item of ancient Yakutan origin called the Orichalc Diagna statuette, which displays the previously mentioned god holding a severed head. So where does this all connect to our real world? Well, let's compare the pair. Atlantis, supposedly a place with Orichalcum metal and Orichalcum structures in real-world myths, sank into the sea after some kind of terrible cataclysm. Now that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yakuta, the land of the great Orichalc Tower, and Yakutans who used Orichalcum weapons suffered some kind of cataclysm, causing it to sink into the sea. You can start to see now the connections between Yakuta and Atlantis, as they both sank into the sea and were both sources of Orichalcum, in addition to both of these places being home to Orichalcum structures. It's a neat little connection, and I would be highly surprised if this was not an intentional analogy written into the lore. However, where the difference lies between our world and the world of Nirn is the fact that Orichalcum is found across Tamriel as well, and is not an unknown or mythical metal lost to time, like it is in our own world. The other quite obvious and glaring difference is the use of this metal by the orcs. It is the orcs of Tamriel that are renowned for their use of this metal to create their orcish armor and weapons. The book Heavy Armor Forging by Sven Twohammers details the process of orcish armor creation. Orcish armor requires large amounts of orichalcum melded with a bit of iron. Heat should be used sparingly lest it become brittle. The orcs are masters of this technique, but it can be learned by any smith with patience and skill. So they construct their crafts by melding the orichalcum with iron and using low amounts of heat so that the material does not become brittle. As a result, we end up with such creations as the exceptionally ornate and beautiful orcish armor and weapons that appeared in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. The style, or theme I guess, for the orcish armor is reflective of the inspirations behind the orcs themselves, real-life cultures such as the Mongols and other northern Asian cultures such as the Jurchens and Manchus. These beautiful sets really highlight the unmatched skill in the forging of weapons and armor by the orcs. However, by the time of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the orcish style seems to have taken a nosedive in terms of craftsmanship. Not that the orcish weapons and armor of Skyrim are of any less quality or efficient in their purposes of protection and killing, but they no longer bear the signature ornate style of previous games, instead favoring a much more Lord of the Rings style orcish armor, crude and barbaric looking. This could be explained by the tribes of orcs in Skyrim who were creating the armor. Perhaps they are disconnected from Orsinium and any form of high orcish culture, I guess you could call it, which is a decent explanation, but considering that this kind of jagged, chunkier style of orcish armor made its way into the Elder Scrolls Online, which is set in the mid-Second Era, it would seem that they have made it part of the orcish identity, which personally I find unfortunate because I loved orcish armor in Oblivion and Morrowind, and I thought a highly ornate and beautiful armor gave them a really nice contrast to their warlike and aggressive demeanors, making them more interesting than just straight up typical orc barbarians who have no care for beauty, reducing them to little more than ooga booga caveman culture. If anything, you could make the case that their warrior culture should result in great pride in the craftsmanship of their armor and weapons. If you were to look at many real-world cultures, the pride and appearance in their armor is apparent, and often it exceeds functionality. For example, the Spartans and their cuirass with built-in abs and their helmets with grand plumes, or the samurai and their extensive helms with detailed masks with built-in mustaches. These details and ornate features are not necessary nor particularly functional, but they enhanced the grandeur and appearance of the warrior, displaying cultural pride. It's a shame to see this element of the orcish culture disappear. Orichalcum metal seems seldom used outside the work of orcish smiths. It would seem that most non-orcs of Tamriel would prefer typical materials like iron or steel, or perhaps local materials more available in their native locations such as chitin in Morrowind. Orichalcum has been used by the orcs in creation of many simpler tools or ornaments as well. The Elder Scrolls Online displays quite a few, such as the orichalc bust of King Kurog, an orichalcum incense burner, orichalcum milking pails, orichalcum mud crab crackers, orichalcum work hammers, pitons, and even what are cleverly named orichalipers. But we have not seen much use of orichalcum for more mundane items outside of the Second Era. Even the orcs of Skyrim's tribes use orichalcum seemingly exclusively for weapons and armor. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is how orichalcum works and the real-world mythological origins of the metal and how it influenced the Elder Scrolls version. So Yakuta is the Elder Scrolls Atlantis in more ways than just the fact that it sank into the sea after a cataclysm. What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it and you want to see more of these deep dives into the metals of the Elder Scrolls. Perhaps suggest what metals or armors that you'd want to see in the next video, and let me know what your favorite version of orcish armor has been. The more Asian, ornate style from previous Elder Scrolls games, or do you like your orcs more Tolkien-esque? Thanks so much for watching, guys. You can catch us on Twitter. The links to all our social media accounts are down below in the description. Thanks again. I hope you have an amazing day. My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.